Thank you for joining me today on the Moms Who Know podcast, the podcast for moms who know that when they take care of themselves, they can take better care of everyone else. Before we get into the show, I just wanted to remind you to follow me on Instagram and Facebook. Both can be found at Moms Who Know Podcast. And it's there that you'll really get to jump into the conversation. When you hear something that stands out to you or you want to dive a little deeper, you don't have to just be a listener with these conversations. You can be an active participant, and I would love to have you. So please join us there. Hello and welcome to the Moms Who Know podcast. I'm your host, Chanel Nielsen, and my guest today is Shauna Armitage. Shauna, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
I am looking forward to this conversation and want to talk first and give a little introduction. So Shauna is a mom of 4. She is a business owner. She's a growth consultant for startups and small businesses, and she helps to grow people's businesses. She's also an advocate for women in business. And most importantly, she's a mama like all of us. So she understands what it is like to be in the trenches and to be juggling so many different things. She has very young kids, a 9, 4, 2, and 2-month-old. So she really is in the trenches of knowing what that's like to try to do all these things at once. So Shauna, I would love to, anything I missed, first of all, that you would tell us about your family or in fact, before the call, why don't we start there? Tell us a little bit about your husband.
My husband is in the Air Force. He's basically an old man when he went into the Air Force because he went in at 25. And most people go in when they get out of high school. So we had already been out working in the world, and we had already had a child before he went into the Air Force. So it was a very big change for us when we were both 25 years old when he went in. And that was a big change at that point in our lives.
Yeah. Okay. So, and he was already a dad when he got started. So you said that recently, not too long ago, that he was deployed. When was that?
That was in 2017. It was July 2017 to February of 2018. He was gone for 6 months.
Okay. And talk a little bit about what that was like for you with the 3 kids at home. And you were not pregnant. You said you had your last one
I was
after.
not pregnant at the same time.
Just checking. Okay. So 3 at home.
It was a little insane. I was working for a friend of mine. I had left a stable job as an SEO coach with a reputable brand to come in as a number 2 for his digital agency. And I was really excited. This was my dream job. And it wasn't a really good fit. We did not agree about how to treat the clients or how things should be done. And 6 months after that, he fired me. And that was just 3 weeks before my husband shipped out. So now I had these kids at home, and we've always relied on my income just as much as we've relied on his. So I kind of had a choice to make at that point of what I was going to do to keep supporting the family. And I ultimately decided that I was going to go out and do business on my own. So my husband left for 6 months, and then it was just me and the 3 kids while I started building my business.
Oh my goodness. Okay. That sounds really tough and amazing at the same time. So, all right. Well, we'll probably get a little bit into that. Let's back up a little bit, because I know that you said for a while you had really struggled with, being in mommy mode all the time. Tell us kind of what that looked like for you when you were in where it felt really like a struggle.
I think part of the reason that I felt that way is because I had my first child very young. I was pregnant at 21 and I had my son when I was 22. So I didn't have a big period between when I got my college degrees and kind of growing into my own adulthood. I had him, and I would not do it any other way. He's a great kid, and having him young was a great experience, but I don't think I got much time to figure out who I was. So then over the years, when I had more children later, when we had to move for my husband's job in the Air Force, it was really about everybody else. And I was okay with that. That's the time that I was at in my life. But somewhere along the way, I lost myself. And when I had my 3rd child, after my third child was born, you could probably find me all the time in just black leggings and like gray t-shirts from Target. And I looked at myself one day and I was like, is this what I've become? Like, where's that vibrant woman that my husband fell in love with? Where's that woman that went to college and got 2 bachelor's degrees and had dreams about things that she was going to do for herself? And I didn't see that person anymore.
Okay. I am really, I've been really just thinking about this part keeps resonating with me. You said, I didn't get time to figure out who I was. I think it's a really interesting mindset. Now, in my culture, I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and it is our culture kind of to get married and have kids pretty young. And so I think that a lot of people in my culture have that same, 22 is not a super young age to have kids in our culture, we'll just say. So it's interesting. You said you didn't get time to figure out who you were. Do you think that if you would have had kids, 10 years later, say at age 32, how would that experience have been different?
It's hard to say because it's speculation. I don't know. Because speculate with me for a second. Because I just want to think about this concept. I think it's something we hear, and I want to go a little deeper here because I'm just wondering, what kind of happens in that you build your career, right? A lot of people do.
Yeah.
For me, I definitely didn't. I think college, while people get freedom for the first time, I still think it's a very controlled environment. And a lot of times you don't have the responsibility that you would if you were out in the real world. And when I was out in the real world, then my focus became husband, my focus became son, my focus became providing for that family. And that didn't necessarily coincide with the things that I was passionate about or that I wanted to do. So I think that maybe if I didn't have so many responsibilities, or if I had a little bit more freedom, I would have been able to travel more, or I would have been able to maybe try different things in my careers, because the fear of failure wouldn't have been so great. Because if I failed, okay, I'll just pick up and try something else. It wouldn't be like, oh, I failed, I can't feed my son this month.
Okay. So a little more freedom, a little less responsibility there is kind of that figuring out process that you're talking about. I can see it. Okay. I see where you're coming from. Now, you said also that, in this period, it was all about everyone else. As a mom, I think we can all relate with that. It is. We feel like that, our lives become this, it's all about what we do for everyone else. And in some ways that is amazing and beautiful and a wonderful thing. And in other ways, it's really hard. So it's can both, kind of, sure. Yeah, it's both. So talk to us about both sides of that.
Being a mother is amazing. If I didn't think that, I certainly wouldn't have 4 children right now. I love just being a part of these kids' lives. And when I call myself the chief growth facilitator, because I'm, helping grow these tiny humans into great adults. And I love that. And watching them grow, and it's so much fun. Everything that we do with the kids is so much fun. But on the other hand, you really dedicate yourself to them very fully, whether it's staying up late to, sew pants that my little boy ripped through at school, or baking for the bake sale, or bringing my daughters to dance or gymnastics, or even with my youngest, it could be being up all night feeding. So depending on what age or stage that they're in, there's beautiful moments about every single one of them. And they're also counterbalanced with very struggling, challenging moments.
Yeah, which we all know, right? There's definitely both sides of that spectrum. So, when you were at this really tough point, when it just felt like it was all about everyone else and you didn't even know who you were, how did things shift for you?
I think this sounds so silly. A friend of mine was having a jewelry party. A friend of hers was in an MLM and she was having a jewelry party. And I wasn't even local. We did this on Facebook. And I looked and I said, some of these are so pretty. Like I would just like to have some jewelry for myself. I can't remember the last time I wore something pretty like this. So I bought myself a couple pieces and I started getting compliments on them. And that it was about me. It wasn't about, oh, your kid looks cute today. It wasn't about, oh, he did a great job in the basketball game. It was like, you look really nice. And it started to really, for me, reestablish a sense of self. Instead of just putting on a t-shirt and leggings, I was conscious of what I was wearing when I was going out. And something as small and simple like that, it made me start to find my own voice again.
Okay. I love that it was just a simple moment that did that for you. And then to go a little bit more on that, what does that mean? It's helped you start to find your voice.
Well, I think that was probably around the time where I started to get more confidence in myself. And that's when I started talking up to the boss that I had in the business that I was in, saying, this isn't right. And these people need our support. And it should be less about the money and more about taking care of the people who are, supporting this business. And he ended up firing me, saying that it wasn't a good culture fit. And I got to the point where I was very sad about that. I've never been fired before in my life. That was terrifying. But at the same time, it was really empowering because I knew that I was standing up for what was right. And if that wasn't compatible with the company that I was at, then I needed to be somewhere else. So I realized that I did have a voice and I could start using it for the things that mattered to me.
Okay, I love that. That even though this was sad and scary and all these things to get fired, that you say it was empowering. And I think that that really speaks to the fact that what led to you being fired was not something, shameful or bad. It was you being true to yourself. So of course, that is empowering. You were saying what needed to be said, and that is a powerful thing. Now, how did finding this voice and this shift in you that started with, a simple wardrobe change, how did that shift things in your family and with your kids?
So I always wanted to be a role model for my kids. I think we all do. For me, it's really important to show my kids that roles don't have to be gendered. I think that we sometimes fall into these norms where, the dad goes off to work and then the mom cooks and cleans and takes care of the kids. And even if a mom is a working mom, I think studies show that they still, with like the family responsibilities, work something like, 80 or 100 hours a week. It's ridiculous. So for me, I've got 3 girls and 1 boy, and I wanted all of them to see that it's a group effort and the women can go to work and be strong and impactful, and the boys can cook and clean and contribute to the family on that level as well. And that really made a difference in my marriage because I think that without actually realizing it, my husband and I had an unspoken contract where I would take the kids to the doctor's appointments and I would push back my work calls and I would do the cooking and cleaning. And it wasn't anything that we had ever discussed. It just kind of happened that way. And the two of us stopped and we're like, wait a minute, why did it happen this way? And we consciously took a step back and started splitting up things more evenly. And I think that's good for both of my girls and my son to see in the home.
Yeah. Did that take a lot of negotiation with you and your husband?
I wouldn't say it was negotiation at all because it wasn't about me being like the naggy wife, like, I need you to step up. It was more like I had this moment where had a light bulb moment, and I said, this isn't even. Why am I doing all of this? It doesn't have to be like that. And he and I had a conversation, and he's like, oh yeah, you're right. And we don't have set things that we do. We're much more flexible when it comes to life than that. We just both do it more evenly. Before, a year or 2 years ago, it would be me doing all the drop-offs and the pickups. Now it would be like, hey, who is dropping the kids off at school tomorrow morning and who's picking them up?
Yeah. Okay. I think this is such an interesting thing to talk about because, in my marriage, we have traditionally been, my husband goes to work and I stay home. Mm-hmm. And as the years have gone by and I've started doing more work, in addition to the podcast, I work for another company and we've got 5 kids and there's so many things that there is a renegotiation process. And it hasn't been a painful or a contentious kind of thing. We've been able to talk about it, but we have to keep looking at it. And it's interesting that you say, for you, it just kept piling on and you were just kind of doing it. And even though you were working too, like you just handled it. And I think as women, that's kind of our tendency, right? We just do it. And sometimes we can end up feeling bitter or resentful or, my husband, why isn't he helping? When a simple conversation, hey, so-and-so has soccer practice. Who's going to pick him up? Let's sit down with our calendars and figure this out. And talking and just involving your husband instead of taking it all on you can go such a long way. And it doesn't even have to be a big deal, but sometimes we just have to open the dialogue.
I think at one point I just realized that I was feeling resentful towards him. But the truth is that it was just as much my fault as it was his.
Yes.
Because if I was just picking it up, if I was just doing it, then he didn't feel like it needed to be done. And I'll be perfectly honest, I am a control freak. I am a natural born project manager. I love to oversee situations. So I just naturally took a lot of things on myself. And then when he wasn't doing them, I felt resentful. But it was on me just as much as it was him because I wasn't communicating that I needed it to be a different way. He just assumed I had it because I was doing it.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's really common. It's just, easy to just do and handle and then, not have the conversation. And then these feelings kind of build up. And so when, as women, as we can realize like, hey, I think that was really an important thing that you pointed out. Hey, I'm doing all this and I want to be a better example for my kids. I want to have a little more equal in my marriage. And I think just that noticing and that realization is a really powerful thing. Are there any other lessons that you learned in this process of as you kind of found yourself?
I think that everybody has to go through their own process. I don't think that if I hadn't got to that point after my 3rd child where I saw myself and I was like, this is not the person I want to be. I think that everybody has to go through it and be in the thick of it a little bit before they can realize that they're not who they want to be yet. Mm-hmm. And we're constantly growing and changing, and that's a good thing. But you have to facilitate your own growth. You can't just listen to the podcasts and read all of the self-help books. You have to actually take actionable steps towards being a better version of yourself or being more true to yourself. And I think a lot of people miss out on that. They're inspired by things that they see, but they don't actually step up and take action for themselves.
So true. I think a lot of times what happens is, like you said, you'll hear something or read something and get so excited. And then it seems like too hard, too far, too much. And so when we can break it down and when it can feel doable and feel actionable, that little step, that tiny little thing, which, for you, buying jewelry, that little tiny, instance of self-care made a difference. It led to other things. It continued on and it snowballed. And I think a lot of times we think, oh gosh, it has to be like this big thing have a big change. When I think really it's the opposite. It's these tiny little things that then lead to more change and more change and more change. And it's only looking back that you can see that things actually have changed, but it comes from those tiny steps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Okay. Well, I know that you really reach out and work with business women. If anyone is looking for help from you, can you tell us a little bit more about what you do and how they can get more information?
Sure. I work as a marketing consultant. So anybody who wants to learn more can find me on makingmoxie.com. I work with these businesses either as a coach, and I like to work with the startups more in a consultant role where I'm more in their businesses on a day-to-day basis, and I'm helping with the execution and analytics to help their business grow. And it's a really fun job, and I really love the opportunity to work with women one-on-one in that kind of way.
That is awesome. Okay, we will link to that. And any final thoughts, specifically on advice, maybe for other moms who are kind of stuck in this mommy mode and can't seem to get out and are kind of where you were before? What would you say to those moms?
I think that you have to find that one thing. When we think about getting dressed up or putting on jewelry or putting on makeup, I think a lot of times we do it for other people. We do it for the people who are going to be in the meeting, or we get dressed up on a date for our husbands. But that moment for me was when I decided to do it for myself, because I wanted to like the way that I looked. I didn't want to look nice for someone else. So whether you are taking a little time away from your kids, or asking your husband to cook more dinners, or you're starting a little side business because it brings you joy, you need to take that one small step towards doing something that is just for you and speaks to the person that you are maybe before you became a mother, or the person that you've grown into after you became a mother.
I love that, because we are always growing and changing. And I think that that is such good advice. Find that one thing. And when you get inspired, like you mentioned earlier, when you get this excitement about doing something, that's how you know that's your thing. Like, okay. And you don't have to get there right away, but when you hear something that moves you and inspires you to want to try, go and do it. Go buy the jewelry or whatever it is for you that just makes you excited again. And so I think that's great advice for any moms who are struggling right now. Shauna, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thanks everyone for listening. We will see you next week on Moms Who Know. One thing that I love about hosting a podcast is getting to talk to so many different people with different opinions and different stories. And I love learning from Shauna. I wanted to share just my thoughts on something that we talked about in the show, because as we were talking, I asked a few questions kind of going this direction, but I wanted to just share my opinion here. I respect and honor Shauna's opinion, and I think that it's something that a lot of us hear. And this is the part that we talked about finding yourself. And for Shauna, the answer was for her to start a business and to go outside of herself. And I think that's an awesome answer. And I just wanted to add, for my stay-at-home moms, and really just as myself, as a stay-at-home, now work-at-home mom, you don't have to always have that answer. And I just wanted to say that because I feel like that is a lot of time what we hear. We feel like, or we hear a lot that, to find ourselves, it's something outside of our family. And I just want to add my opinion that we can find ourselves within our family. And that when we lose our sense of self, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to do something other than family. There's something that has to happen to connect with our deeper sense of self. And that's a big reason why I emphasize self-care and taking care of yourself and learning what you need. I just wanted to point that out. I hope that's helpful to someone. I definitely respect Shauna's opinion on the subject and what worked for her. And I don't think she's saying it's prescriptive for everyone. And I'm not saying that this is prescriptive for everyone either. But I just want to put that out there as my opinion that we can find our purpose in motherhood. Some of us can find our purpose outside of motherhood as well. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that or anything else that stood out to you in the podcast today. Hop on over to Facebook or Instagram and let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys next week.